What's going on, golf cavers? In this video, we'll be reviewing in detail a feature on the TrackMan called the Optimizer. The Optimizer is a program which tells you your full potential in each shot. So first step is to show you how to navigate there. On the bottom right, you'll see a button called Optimizer. Once you press that, it will come up here with the Optimizer. If it does not come up right away, you might have to go to the navigation menu on the top right, click menu, and you'll see the Optimizer as an option. You'll notice if TrackMan does not have Optimizer highlighted over here, and you go to the options, it will not show you the Optimizer. So highlight the Optimizer, and then you'll see it as an option. Select it, and then you'll see it pop up on your screen here. So let's talk about the Optimizer. What it does is based on what club you're swinging. So in this case, I've selected a 5-iron, and how hard you swung that club. In this case, I swung my 5-iron about 85 miles an hour. It'll show you how far that ball actually carried and how far it should have carried based on what club you swung and how hard you swung. There's one other way to customize the Optimizer based on what type of shot you're trying to hit. In most cases, I'd recommend choosing mid-trajectory. If you were practicing certain types of shots, for example, getting a higher trajectory or lower trajectory, you could set the Optimizer accordingly, but you could keep it at mid-trajectory for most of the time. So walking through the Optimizer, we have the 5-iron. TrackMan's basing these numbers off your 5-iron being bent at about a 27 degree. So your club might be a bit different, but that's what it's basing the 5-iron off of. Either way, it'll still show you great results. As we mentioned, swinging a 5-iron, 85 miles an hour, I should have hit that ball 176 yards. It should have carried that far. I actually carried 166 yards. The Optimizer will never tell you to swing harder. It'll just say, based on how hard you swung, this is what could have happened. So a lot of people come to GolfCave and they ask, okay, great, I have all these numbers, but what do they mean? Where should they be? That's where the Optimizer comes to play. So you'll see these numbers here, these columns, and these stats, and you'll see these blue ranges, which is where those stats should have been, and these orange tags are where you were. So it's like a virtual instructor telling you what went wrong and right on that shot. These are the stats that are most involved with distance, and so that's why those are the ones being focused on. So if we go through each of these numbers, we'll show you what they mean and where they should be. At a high level, please do not chase the numbers. Don't look at this and say, oh, I have to adjust my whole swing to get my spin loft where it needs to be or my launch angle. This is more of a representation of where your swing is at, and as you improve over time, develop proper mechanics, these numbers should start to fall into the blue ranges, but I advise against looking at this to try to chase the numbers. It just shows you what your potential could be. And that's not to say as you improve your swing mechanics, you can't increase your club speed, increase your your optimal here. That's always an option too, but with that existing swing, this is what you could accomplish. So if we go to the attack angle, we'll talk about that at first. So the attack angle, if you ever hear someone saying, I'm swinging down on the ball or I'm swinging up on the ball, they're talking about attack angle. So a negative attack angle, as you see here, negative 3.6, that literally means I impacted that ball as my club was on its way down, 3.6 degrees. If that number was 0, that means I impacted the ball right at, we'll call it the inflection point, right as my club finished at the lowest point of the swing and was just about to start coming upwards. That'd be a 0 attack angle. If I impacted the ball as my club head was on its way up in my swing, that would be a positive attack angle. So each club and club speed has their own optimal attack angle. In this case, based on swinging a 5-iron, 85 miles an hour, my optimal attack angle would have been -2 to -4. So I was -3.6, I'm in that blue range, pretty good. My attack angle was okay on that shot. Spin loft is actually a formula. It's dynamic loft minus attack angle. So I'm gonna add a stat on the bottom here. As you may know, you could add over 20 stats to each swing and see why that ball flew the way it did. But I'm looking for dynamic loft right here. And you'll see, I'll put this next to attack angle. So dynamic loft minus attack angle equals spin loft. So if your spin loft is off, you have two things to look at. Dynamic loft is telling you what was the angle of the club when you impacted that ball. So if you have, for example, a driver that says 11 degrees on it, it's not saying that your dynamic loft should be 11 degrees, but that's what it's talking about. That degree of the club when it impacted that ball. 0 degrees of dynamic loft would mean that club head was perfectly perpendicular to the ground when it struck the ball, and the further you increase that angle, the bigger dynamic loft you have. Attack angle we just spoke about, so now we're talking about dynamic loft. So in this situation, my attack angle was good, but my spin loft was out of the range. So if my attack angle was good, that means I have to look at spin loft to adjust that to get my spin loft in the proper range. So in this case, if my attack angle was good, my spin loft was too high, that means my dynamic loft was too high. So I was lofting my 5-iron maybe closer to a 6-iron. I'm not using that club how it's meant to be. Ball speed is a function of a stat called smash factor. How flush did you hit that shot related to how hard you swung. So just because someone swings 20 more miles an hour than you, their ball speed could still be the same. That means they're not being efficient with that shot. So ball speed in this is telling you how fast the ball came off the club head. In this case, my ball came off the club head at 116 miles an hour. Optimal range is 120 to, let's say, 122 and some change. So I'm not hitting that ball efficiently. Chances are you're not hitting that ball in the center of the club head. So if you hit that ball in the center of the club face, you'll have a higher ball speed than hitting it off the toe or the hosel. You could come to GolfCave and you could check on the impact location to see where that ball struck. So we could do that here. There's some other factors that come to play as well other than just impact. So that ball wasn't so far off the center, but I got some room to work with. So that's why my ball speed wasn't exactly where it could have been. I didn't hit that shot perfectly in the center, which means I had some room for improvement. So that's what the ball speed column is telling you. Launch angle is telling you what was the angle that ball launched compared to the ground. So if you hit a really low worm burner, that's a really low launch angle. If you hit a really high shot, that's a really high launch angle. So in this case, my launch angle was higher than it should have been. Going back, as we mentioned, to spin loft, we said my dynamic loft was too high. I was lofting that 5-iron more than I should have been, which it makes sense. That's why my launch angle is higher than it should have been, because I was hitting that club maybe more like a 6 as opposed to a 5. Same thing with the spin rate. Typically, the more dynamic loft you have, look at a 60 degree compared to a driver. That 60 degree has more spin. It's a loftier club. It'll give that ball much more spin. Could have been why my spin rate was high. I used that 5-iron closer to a 6-iron. And my height was towards the top, not out of range, still decent. But that's the optimizer at a high level with your irons. And it's a really great tool to see what you did versus what you could have done, see that full potential, see how much room you have for improvement. Just to recap, we had 176 yards optimal. I did 166, and I have 10 yards for improvement. That's pretty massive. I took a couple shots earlier today. It took me a couple tries, but you could also see optimal numbers. So I'm gonna go back to a previous shot. So when this, you'll see this is a previous shot of mine. When this turns blue, even if all your stats aren't in the blue ranges themselves, it more or less says, hey, you hit that ball pretty much as good as you could have. It doesn't have any concern for accuracy. It's just saying with that swing speed, did that ball go as far as it could have gone? In this case, when it turns blue like that, it's a pretty good feeling and TrackMan's pretty happy with your distance. Another thing I want to show you is the optimizer with the driver. It's a little different with the driver because it'll give you a couple more options to choose from. On the driver, this drop down will give you some options. You could look at the max carry. So this is how far my driver should have went versus how far it actually carried. You could look at the total. So this is including rollout. And you could also look at max carry and max total combined. So this is a great way, as I mentioned, to see what you could have done in each shot, as opposed to spending $600 on the latest club to add 5 yards. You could come to GolfCave, look at the optimizer and say, hey, let me just work on my game at GolfCave a little more. I could add 13 yards to my drive with some practice. So thank you for watching. Hope you learned something on how to play the cave.